As every entrepreneur knows, valuation is something that people understand very well and the importance of it. But there are a lot of other terms that kind of determine the relationship that you will be able to have with your investor. First one is, which is very close and which people don't realize how important it is the reserved matters. So reserved matters are matters which are basically have been highlighted in a term sheet, which determine where you need permission from your investors before you execute them. It can be operational or strategic in nature. Operational meaning, for example, it might say for every person who you hire who has a higher salary bracket of more than 10 lakhs a year, you need to take the permission of the investor. In early stage, when you are not particularly sure how the hiring should be, it might be helpful to have an investor's opinion, but again, it's questionable whether you want investors' approval before you make every hiring decision. A strategic reserved matter can be if there is any strategic partnership that you are doing, you need the permission of an investor. Again, these are in place to give you some guidance, but it is very negotiable and you should be able to talk to your investors on what makes sense and what does not. Now, the second thing is founder vesting. Now, founder vesting is typically what happens is you earn a certain percentage of equity. What every external investor comes in and for the right reasons suggests that all the equity that you own does not belong to you today on day one after the investment. The entire 100 shares will not be given to you on day one. These 100 will vest over typically a 4-year period or maybe 5-year period or 3-year period, determining how you will be able to negotiate with your investor. Which means that over 4 years, if you have 100 shares, 25 shares will be awarded to you at the end of each year. The idea here is very simple. The investor wants to protect his downside in the eventuality that one of the founders decides to walk and takes a big bunch of equity with them. The way you look at it is obviously that this is blood and sweat for you and you would want to get the maximum or the best vesting schedule that you want. The third is liquidation preference. It essentially means if today an investor has put in $1 million and tomorrow if he basically there is an exit, that is that the company is either sold for say $10 million, first the investor is allowed to take his or her money out of the company and then the rest of the money is basically divided among all the shareholders. Now liquidation preference can go up to 2x, 3x, etc. If it's 2x, that means first if the investor has invested $1 million, $2 million are basically taken out of the kitty, paid back to the investor, and the remaining $8 million is divided among all shareholders. 1x is pretty standard, but if investor is asking for more, that's something that you should be able to ask for, negotiate. The fourth point, again, which I think most of you are quite familiar with, is basically the board seats. Every company has a board of directors. Typically, if you are one founder, obviously you will be. If you are more than one founder, it's a little tricky situation where you need to understand how many founders are going to be on the board and how many investors want to be on the board. Typically, they want to match 1-to-1, but again, it's something that you should be able to negotiate. The last one is drag along. Now, drag along sounds pretty brutal, but the reality of it is that a drag along clause typically in a very rudimentary way is giving an investor the flexibility to force your hand to sell the company. Maybe the company is not going the way that they planned, or the fact that they feel that the entrepreneur is not doing the best, or they feel that this is the best, there's a very good deal available on the table. One of the things that you can negotiate very well is the duration period as to when the drag along kicks in. Does the drag along kick in after 3 years? Does the drag along kick in 5 years? Does the drag along kick in 6 years? These are the 5 important terms that you should be able to negotiate in a term sheet. Valuation is something that stands on top of your head. This determines control that you have on your company and also the relationship that you build with your investor.